Okay, so 10.1 part 3, the second half. If you are into fascism and totalitarianism, Italy may have seemed like blah to you. But if you were wanting a more successful fascist state, if that's not, that's even, you can put those two words together, successful fascist state, here is Nazi Germany. So the roots of Nazism is going to be extreme nationalism plus racism equals Nazism. And so we're going to start with nationalism, and this really becomes like hyper nationalism. I mean, you were Italian in Italy, or you were part of the state in the Soviet Union. But we're going to see that Germany is nationalistic but becomes defensive or hyper nationalistic after losing World War I. We're going to see that there's even some debate with Hitler, was it really a loss? And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And so what feeds into this is that Treaty of Versailles. Remember, the Germans felt stabbed in the back by the Weimar Republic signing of the Versailles Treaty, that new government, which is really what doomed it from the start. And this, hanging on to this is going to feed Germany's frustration. And out of this, they're going to want to, or feel the need to rise up and show the world that you can't stab us in the back. We are here. We are coming forward. And then to add on top of that, this very defensive and wounded, victim syndrome is going to be combined the racist stuff, or these racist ideas. And it's the construction of the idea that blonde hair, blue-eyed, Aryan race, which Hitler will misappropriate that word Aryan, but the Aryan race, or Germans, is the master race, and that they have racial superiority. So kind of we covering your social Darwinism and things like that. This is really leading out of that racial superiority of the Germanic peoples. Therefore, they deserve more. They deserve Lebensraum, which we're going to see, living space. They deserve to go out and take over other areas. And so then it's going to create this social hierarchy. So if you have the Aryan or Germanic race at the top, then at the very bottom, you're going to see Jews and Slavs, just mainly because they're in the Germans' way. And then I think you'd even almost put Africans, they would put above the Jews and Slavs. Definitely Jews bottom, maybe Africans a little bit under Slavs. And so we're going to see that this leads to the rise of an individual by the name of Adolf Hitler. And he's going to come onto the scene promoting both of these things. These are really going to be his, campaign tokens. And by the way, unfortunately, there's still some people really into this stuff. And so here is Hitler as a child. I mean, look, this cute little guy, little kid is going to try to rise up and rule the world. It almost makes you look at other baby pictures ooh, what's this person capable of? But Hitler as a child here, kind of disturbing, I always think, looking at his sweet little innocent baby pictures and then what's going to come of it. But born in Austria in 1889. His dad is going to die when he's 14 and his mom a couple of years later. He is going to drop out of high school when he is 16. So see, don't drop out of high school. Look early unless I don't know if the path of Hitler is what you want. But we're going to see that Hitler's going to kind of take this path, and we're going to follow with that stab in the back what he thinks about it. But also his involvement in World War I is going to have a part in this too. And so he is going to be a soldier in World War I. I'll show you a picture here in a second, and actually be blinded in a gas attack. So he has seen, and then he's temporarily blinded, and then not been able to see because of the horrors of war. And it's really out of this that he gets this nationalistic, it wasn't our fault. This was a conspiracy. This was a conspiracy of Jews and commies in the Weimar Republic to sign that Versailles Treaty, and we didn't really lose. It was a conspiracy, and we need to get rid of these people that were part of the conspiracy. And so Hitler's actually going to move to Vienna when he's 19 and try to study art. but he's going to end up becoming, a failed artist. But while he's there, what's important about this in this picture, I don't know if he found it later and pointed out, or somebody's found it later where it came from. But while there, he falls under the influence of the mayor of Vienna, Karl Lueger, who is very anti-Semitic or anti-Jew. Hitler listens to him intently, and it's going to set him on a path of fierce nationalism, because his marriage is very nationalistic. Hitler, because of this experience, is going to hate the Habsburg. He's going to hate multi-ethnicity. He's going to hate Marxism. So these experiences of his life are really going to lead him on the path that brings about, no spoiler alert, all of the rise to totalitarianism and horror that we're going to see moving into World War II. Also, he's going to move in 1913 to Munich, which is in Germany, and that is at the point in which he joins the army and will be involved in World War I. Like I said, so here's a picture of him actually in Munich in 1914 listening to the Kaiser. So all of this building up this very nationalistic feeling in Hitler, anti-multi-ethnicity, anti-Semitic, anti-Habsburgs, all of these things. And so here's a picture of Hitler in World War I, before he is temporarily blinded by a gas attack. And so his involvement in World War I, again, going to build some more of that nationalistic pride. And also he's going to say, when the stabbing of the back happened, when this armistice was signed, where were the German troops? They weren't even there. He's going to say, they were blocked off. And so this was just really a conspiracy, and he's going to start to place some blame, and we're going to see how that plays out. But first we need to follow his rise to power, and that's going to happen within the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or the Nazi Party, after his service in World War I. And so Hitler, with all of these ideas in his head, anti-Semitism, very nationalistic, racist, hating Habsburgs, hating multi-ethnicity, hating Marxism, is going to join the National Socialist German Workers' Party. And the reason it becomes called Nazi is because it's short for the National Socialist German Workers' Party. It sounds like the first two words in German. And then he's going to become the leader of this party, which had only started out as a tiny group of only 7 members, that is going to grow dramatically within just a few years. And we're going to see that part of that is under his charisma. And I have some really cool speech videos to post as some enrichment here on just how charismatic, if you haven't heard Hitler speak, how he gets people to follow him. But we need to kind of follow in key what we've been talking about. And so we know that no great totalitarian ruler arises without a group of thugs underneath them. So we're going to talk about Adolf Hitler's thugs, called the SA, or the brown shirts, and this is his not his paramilitary group, just as we saw the black shirts in Italy. All right, and so the brown shirts are really just going to enforce what Hitler wants, and they are going to also terrorize opponents in the streets. So let's say like a communist supporter is like, workers of Germany unite, and stands up, they are going to terrorize them. They are going to beat them down. They are going to silence any political opponents. They're also known as the SA. These brown shirts, called brown shirts because they wear brown shirts, and we'll get into that in just a second. But in German, I can't even pronounce the German word, but it really means assault detachment, or kind of more of an English version here, stormtroopers. So why brown shirts? Really just because they were cheap. After World War I, the Kaiser's army that had been in Africa had all been wearing brown shirts. And so now the war is over. Now imperialism for Germany is done. And now they have all these brown shirts to sell for cheap. So Hitler's like, okay, buy these brown shirts for cheap, and that's how, hence, they're all wearing brown shirts. So the goal again of the brown shirts is to disrupt meetings of political opponents and harass anti-Nazis, and also to protect anyone who may be against Hitler. The members of the brown shirts, or SA, are former members of the Free Corps, if you remember from Unit 9.4. They were those radical white-wing military group of private armies. And so now this is coming to an end and they need something to do. And they also happen to have a lot of experience with violence, from fighting in the war and in the time period of the Free Corps that we talked about. There's this movie called Swing Kids. I don't know if any of you have ever seen it, but it's about American dancing and like music, and it starts to seep into Germany, and the SA or the brown shirt is going to beat down like these people who just want to be free and dance. They want to be footloose. So maybe after the AP exam, or if you have some free time, I'll offer some extra credit for like doing a little write-up of how this like exemplifies the brown shirt or something. But definitely a movie, AP Euro, it would be covered here. So what's going to happen then is in 1923, Hitler's going to start denouncing the Weimar Republic. He has his thugs to back him who are going to go against anybody that stands against him, and he's just really going to say the Weimar Republic sucks. So in 1923, if you remember what is happening from Unit 9.4, France is occupying the Ruhr, which is that industrial area, the one little rich area left in Germany, to try to get their reparations from World War I, which is called the Ruhr Crisis. And Hitler's all like, that's wrong. Like, why are these French people in Germany, like, they have no right to be here. And remember, the Weimar Republic is passively resisting, so they just stopped working there, but they're not, like, actively resisting the French being there. And so Hitler's going to see this. He's going to say, I need to take over something. The French have taken over the Ruhr. I need to take over something. This is the beer hall push. We talked about this. We're going to talk about it again. And he's going to be like, I'm not going to take over all of Germany, but I'm going to start with the state of Bavaria. All right, so it's 1923, and Hitler's going to try to take over Bavaria, the state of Bavaria. By the way, like car BMW, the B stands for Bavaria. So we have the Prime Minister of Bavaria, who is getting ready to address like 3,000 guys in a beer hall in Munich, because Germans drink a lot of beer. And Hitler and 600 of his brown shirts are going to come in and line the sides of this beer hall to intimidate those in the building. And Hitler then is going to jump up on the speaking platform right as the Prime Minister is getting ready to speak and shout out that the National Revolution has broken out and that the hall is surrounded. So like these 3,000 guys are like, oh crap, look how many of them are in here, how many of them are outside. And so at this time, Hitler and his followers are going to take the Prime Minister in a private room for about 10 minutes. And nobody really knows what's going on because it's just Hitler and his top advisors in the Nazi Party and the Prime Minister. And what the Nazis are trying to do is to get the Prime Minister's support. And there's actually differing accounts of whether or not the Prime Minister in this 10 minutes agrees to support Hitler or says no. But then Hitler's going to return, jump back on the platform, fire his revolver into the ceiling, and eventually, the Prime Minister of Bavaria and General Ludendorff, if you remember from World War I, come out in support of Hitler. And so Hitler's like, okay, I got this support. And so his plan is going to be to take over the government in Munich, just like Mussolini's march on Rome had taken over the government just a couple years before in Italy. So Hitler says, we're going to march on the government buildings in Bavaria. And he lets the Prime Minister go. Probably because he thinks he's in support of him, but this may have been his mistake because the Prime Minister is going to report what happened to the Weimar Republic, who is going to decide to put the Nazis down. They're finally going to take like an active stand. But in the meantime, Hitler is marching with 3,000 guys. He has 3,000 guys now down a narrow street toward the Bavarian government buildings, and it's a very narrow street, so there's 100 police blocking their way, so it's 3,000 versus 100. So then shooting's going to start for about a minute, because the police have guns, of course, and then of course some of the Nazis have guns. 16 Nazis are going to die and 3 policemen, and Hitler will be thrown to the ground and arrested. And so really, what is this? Is treason. So he's going to be tried for trying to overthrow the government. And so Hitler fails in his attempt here because he was able to be shut down. But although he's being charged for treason, the judges are very conservative, like we've talked about before, and very sympathetic. And he only gets a 1-year jail term, which he serves about 9 months of. But now what the important thing is that everyone knows who Hitler is now. It's going to give him national, like, look at that guy who tried to overthrow the Weimar Republic, who is not, that popular anyway. And so he's going to be sent to jail, and he's going to have a whole bunch of time on his hands. And so all kinds of time for Hitler, looking out his window in jail. He is going to realize that a putsch or a coup d'etat does not work. And so that in the future, he'd have to take control of Germany legally, or take control of the Weimar Republic legally, not through a revolution. And so he's going to decide while in jail that instead of leading a revolution, he needs to get the people to vote for him. He needs to take control of the government. The Nazis need to take control of the government legally. And so then, while also in jail with this extra time, because he serves about 9 months, so he figures out pretty quickly in his time that he's going to have to take over legally, he's also going to give us his blueprint for his future plans, which is Mein Kampf, which means my struggle. If you think about Culture Kampf was a culture struggle, so this is his struggle, and he's going to write it while he's in jail, outlining his future plans. I'd just like to note here before I move on with the book that if there are any people that say, like, oh, like after World War I, we didn't know Hitler was going to be that bad. We didn't, know, like when people ask, like, well, how could you let someone like Hitler take control? They knew it's all here. Like, he killed the Jews. Yeah, in this book, all of his plans laid out. And like, Germany is the most literate country in the world at this time, pretty much. And so they just would have read it. It's all right there. There's nothing hidden. There's not like, oh, I'm going to put this like pretty thing together to get people to support. It is all there. So there's no excuse, really, when people talk about excuses for Hitler coming to power. There's all kinds of circumstances, but no excuse to say you didn't know what he was going to do, because it is in the pages of this book. So in this book, he's going to denounce the Treaty of Versailles. He's going to say it was a national humiliation. He's going to denounce the Weimar Republic for accepting the treaty, and he's going to say that they have allowed divisions in Germany when we need a true Germany. So not Germans fighting against Germans, but Germans fighting against everybody else. He wants a stirring of the Volk. So you remember Volkswagen means the people's car. Like, so Volk means the people. So a stirring of the German people to be led by a true leader. And that's what he would call true democracy, is that they are stirred to be led by a true, pure German leader. He's anti-communism and Marxism and all these things. And even anti-socialism. But remember, socialism is in the Nazi Party name. He's going to say that, he is just for what you would call socialism for the little man. Like, he's against those big, like, chain restaurants and like, anybody making excessive income or having all of this capital to invest in goods. And he's going to say that pure Germans must rely on themselves. And so don't trust either. It's just a pure German ruler. And above all of these things that he hates or is against, he is against the Jews. We're going to see that there's a rumor that goes around. A lot of students have heard this, and it's the first thing they mentioned, that his grandfather was Jewish. And there is this time, if you watch a good documentary on Hitler, where he has someone kind of doctor his family tree. But is it for having a Jewish heritage? Probably not. Probably the thing he's trying to hide is there's probably some insanity or feeble-mindedness in his family, like grandpa or aunt or something that's insane, and he doesn't want to be associated with that or that lack of cognizance. So probably more that, but the rumor mill, especially with what happens with the Jews, everyone looking kind of for that conspiracy there. Now, also in his book, he's going to call for Lebensraum, which translates to mean living space. And so remember, he's going to say that, like, Germans don't have enough land. They've lost land in the Treaty of Versailles. And so that Germans should have the right for more land. They need more land. They're a superior race. And namely, wanting to expand east, he wants to remove or completely get rid of the Jews. So there you go. No excuses right there. And turn the Slavs into slave labor. And so, like the root of this, or the word slave comes from Slavs, and to turn them into Slav labor. Alright, and so then we've already covered anti-Semitism. I did that first, oops. But also here with letter C, where we'll finish up, Hitler is also going to get a title. He is going to get the title of Führer, or the Führer, which is just like Mussolini got his title, Il Duce, which is like the father, or, showing his unlimited power. So he will get that title here as well. Okay, so he makes his title Führer, but really, so 1924 to 1929, so a year after the book is written, through 5 years, people are really going to think this guy is wacko, stupid, not altogether. And if you think about what's going on, if you remember in Germany at this time, is things are going good. Just for this brief interim, we have the spirit of Locarno, we have, that money exchange, we have Germany that we cover being back into the national family or the nation of families, and so things are going good. But then what's going to happen, remember, we're going to get the depression in Germany, and so things are going to slide again, and so that's going to make a difference. But for this interim time, you're like, yeah, this guy not got it all together, but we're going to see that change. And so the Great Depression is going to hit. Unemployment, as we learned about, reaches 43% by the end of 1932. And this economic chaos and political impotence is going to play directly into Hitler's hands. He's going to get to say, I am your savior. And we know who he blames for the Depression, the Jews, the commies. He's going to say, I can save you from this commie Jew problem. And he began promising German voters economic, political, and military salvation, promised big business leaders he would restore the economy, assured top army leaders that the Nazis would reject the Versailles Treaty or the stab in the back and rearm Germany. And so then by 1928, due to all of this chaos, we'll see that there's 100,000 Nazis, so 100,000 people, and in 1928 still growing, so they're going to have 12 seats in the Reichstag. And then by 1930, we're going to have 107 seats for the Nazis in the Reichstag, so getting more popular. And then boom, by 1932, when the Great Depression hits, popularity is going to skyrocket at this time. So it's really, out of the chaos breeds these totalitarian regimes. I have the answer. And so you can really argue that the fall of the Weimar Republic is going to be in large part due to the Depression. These totalitarian fascist regimes are going to take advantage of crises like this, and they're going to try to give hope for the future. I can solve this. Put your problems in my hand. I have the answer. And so like I said, this is a time of crisis. Unemployment to reach 43%. It's almost half of the population by the end of 1932 unemployed. And so Hitler's going to say, give me a chance. And so if you think about this, with 43% of people unemployed, what are the workers going to want? They're going to want communism. They're going to want to take from the rich. And what does the middle class want? They want a savior. They want someone to save them from this communism coming, this fear of communism. So they start supporting Hitler. And so all those points that I mentioned to you here with the bullet points, Hitler's going to begin making promises for voters. That's what you do when you run for office and you want to win. He's going to make promises, and they're really going to be promises for everyone, like we've talked about. It's going to be economic, political, and military salvation, promising wanting that middle class who's afraid of communism to get as many votes as he can. So he's made all these promises to get voters, and then in 1932 there's going to be an election, and Nazi Party will get 230 seats in the Reichstag, which is the largest percentage, but not the majority. So they held the largest percentage of a party, but they're not the majority in the Reichstag. And it will actually fall a little bit after 1932, so some could even say that this was the peak of Nazism. But what the Nazis are going to do is their key demographic is going to be appealing to the German youth. And if you think about that, that's because the youth are accepting of change. They are willing to make a change, and so the Nazi Party is really going to gear their campaign towards the German youth. And so then in 1931, 40% of the Nazi Party is under the age of 30, and 67% is under the age of 40. And something you want to note here about the young who are ready for a change, they've grown up disillusioned, like with being third or fourth rate. And so, they really are disillusioned with what things are if you think about the time period they're growing up. And so that's definitely going to play a role with them really wanting a change because of their disillusionment, because of this age of anxiety. So in 1930, the chancellor, so this is before Hitler's chancellor, gains permission from President Hindenburg, that old general guy, which is a position that they have president elected by the people, for emergency rule by decree because of all of these problems, this struggle between social democrats and communists, which is going to contribute to the breakdown of the Weimar Republic, all of this tension. And he gets permission Hitler's actually going to run for this position in 1932, but will lose. But the Nazis are going to win the largest percentage of votes in the Reichstag in 1933 elections, though still not a majority. But they are going to demand, with those number of seats, that Hitler play a leadership role in the government because there's all these Nazis in the Reichstag. So I want you to remember here that Hitler's going to come to power by completely legal means. He tried to putsch the coup d'etat and it did not work, and he will come, and he made that rule that I will come to power legally, and he will. So remember that in the beginning he is voted in by the German people, and Hitler will become chancellor on January the 30th, 1933, appointed by the power of President Paul von Hindenburg. And side note here, this is at the same time that FDR is becoming president of the United States. And so now Hitler is the head of a coalition government with democracy. I mean, there are fair elections. Nobody's lost their right to vote. People are able to vote, and they choose Hitler. This is important to remember because they had a democracy. And in 1933 in the Reichstag, 50% of the seats are held by people other than Nazis or people not in the Nazi party. So they could have stopped the Nazis if they chose to. And so a lot of people ask why. Why did the chancellor put Hitler in charge, or why did the president put Hitler in charge? And maybe it's because he wanted a fall guy. I mean, because really, with not a majority in the Reichstag of Nazis, it would be hard for Hitler to get things passed because it's a democracy. And so maybe they're wanting someone to take the blame, so when things get worse in Germany, they can say, so what did the Nazis do for you? Nothing, and provide this fall guy. And so Hitler comes to power, and he's going to promise another election because he says, I want to see where the true heart of the Volk or the people lies. So another election will take place in March of 1933, and you can really kind of see this as a gamble on Hitler's part. He's really hoping to get over 50% of the seats to be of the Nazi party in the Reichstag so he can get all of his stuff passed. And so now let's look at an acronym for how Hitler came to power, to help you remember the reasons or the, I guess, ingredients or perfect combination of how this came to be. Okay, so LIMP paper is the acronym. So the first one, long-term bitterness, that is that Treaty of Versailles and the stab in the back. The I, ineffective constitution. There were weaknesses in the Weimar Republic's constitution that crippled the government. And allowed Hitler, to step up, was unable to stop it because of the weak constitution. M is going to be money. So remember, the wealthy businessmen are supporting Hitler because he's promising them all kinds of things, and it's going to feed his propaganda campaign, which is P, propaganda. There's a huge propaganda campaign that persuades the masses to think that Jews are terrible and promotes that Hitler is their only hope. Then our next P, that is in paper, program. And that is just that program that Hitler promises something for everyone, so to get the popular vote. A, attacks on other parties. Remember, he's attacking other parties or terrorizing them. There's taxes on other parties. We have the brown shirts beating down people with different opinion. P, personal qualities. As you're going to see with some of the enrichment videos I'm going to put on Edmodo, Hitler's very charismatic. He's mesmerizing. He's organized. He's driven. Also a little crazy, but he thinks God actually called him to do this. But he has the perseverance to stay when others probably would have given up. E, economic depression. Remember, we had the Great Depression, the fall of Wall Street, and massive unemployment in Germany. And then R, he's recruited by Hindenburg, but remember, some say a fall guy, but what really is important here is that he gets the power and he makes the most of it. Okay, and so Hitler's government is going to have a name. It says the Third Reich. And so if there's a third, there must have been a first and a second. The First Reich is considered to be the Holy Roman Empire. The Second Reich under OVB, or Bismarck, and the unification of Germany. And then the Third Reich is going to be what Hitler's going to say is going to be 1,000-year empire, what Hitler wants. But I mean, you can just look at the dates here, 1933 to 1945. I'm not a math teacher, but I'm pretty sure that's not 1,000 years. And so Hitler has this little bit of power, and we saw that his empire is going to last 1,000 years, but 12. So let's get in this next section, just all about Hitler. So we have that election looming up. This was to be in March of 1933. But Hitler's going to try to consolidate power because he has a little bit, he wants more. But before this next election, there's going to be a fire, actually 1 week before the election. The Reichstag building, so they think of it like our Capitol building, burns down. and Hitler is going to use this, and the Nazis are going to use this to crack down on the communists, because they're going to say it's an emergency, it's the commies, they're trying to disrupt everything and take over. And so some people think the Nazis actually started this fire and used it to blame the commies, but I mean, if they did it, it's going to work, because Hitler is going to want then an emergency power, and the Constitution allows this. It allows for him to ask of this emergency power to give him unlimited power, consented to by Hindenburg. And so this is going to allow the SA or brown shirts to step up its terrorism of political opponents, especially the communists. And so the Enabling Act is going to be passed in March of 1933 by the Reichstag, and this will give Hitler that power that he so desires, absolute dictatorial power for 4 years. And so giving him that emergency power to take over. And so the SA stepping up its terrorism, kind of shutting up all other political opponents. We saw that in March, the election of 1933, the Nazi Party is going to be successful, but still only take 50% of the vote. So, I mean, that is kind of sad when you think about that you're trying to shut up everyone else and you still only get 50%. But so then in 1933, right after the election, this is where we get the Enabling Act. So the Nazis are going to have to meet on March 23rd, 1933 in a new building, because the other one is burnt down by whom, we really don't know. But this is where we're going to get the Enabling Act, and again, the absolute dictatorial power of Hitler. It'll make only the Nazi Party legal, and we're going to see the limitation of liberties, because really Hitler wanting this power, he's going to take it and run with it. And so now with this Enabling Act being able to be passed, because it's just, really a majority of the Nazis that still stand there because of the terrorism and locking everyone out, bills only need Hitler's signature to pass. And there's a majority of Nazis now in the Reichstag because they've kind of left everyone else out. And so Hitler is going to take this dictatorial power, and he's going to outlaw strikes and abolish independent labor unions. Publishers, universities, and writers are going to be brought into line, which means that democratic, socialist, and Jewish literature will be put on blacklists. Students and professors, and I'll put a video on Edmodo of this, will burn forbidden books in public squares. They're going to burn and destroy modern art, like Dadaism and all of that, and architecture that were prohibited. We talked about all of these things that are going to be dubbed degenerate art by the Nazis. And so then to top all of this off, President Hindenburg is going to die in 1934, and Hitler's just going to say, we're just going to combine the offices of Chancellor and President, and so he takes over both, and this is where we're going to get Hitler with all power. So definitely the consolidation of power working, and this is when Hitler declares his 1,000-year Reich, the Third Reich, and moving forward. So let's take a look at the Third Reich and a couple people here. Okay, so first guy here, we have Joseph Goebbels. Yeah, it sounds like an R. Who becomes the minister of propaganda for Hitler now that Hitler has begun his 1,000-year Reich and has all of this power. And so his main job is to glorify Hitler and the Nazi state while demonizing Jews and commies. And he gives this movie, which I will try to put on Edmodo for you from Richmond, all kinds of little movies here for you, called The Eternal Jew. And its whole purpose is to make Jews look bad. And he's going to actually use rats to represent Jews, a metaphor for Jews, thinking about our kind of ragtagish theme. But anyway, so they get rats everywhere, and they just breed really fast, and they're crawling, and they're in your food, and they're a nuisance. And so he's going to compare them to Jews. Very anti-Semitic film, so propaganda against Jews. And then we get Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will, which I will hopefully be able to put a part on Edmodo as well. I hope you don't get overwhelmed by all these movies. And it is going to be a documentary of the Nuremberg Rally of 1934, and it's going to be used by the regime as propaganda to make Hitler look larger than life and glorify the Nazi regime. And so the next thing that happens is going to happen in 1934. And so, like, anybody who gets a lot of power, they become paranoid of someone trying to take them over, or they become a target. And there's also people that always, whenever someone comes into power, wants to be like, hey, look at me, like, I'm on your side. And so what's going to happen is Hitler's going to be warned by the middle class and big business. And the army that they are suspicious of the SA or the brown shirts, and they think that the SA is trying to absorb the army because they're bigger than the army, and that, this is going to, then who do you worry about trying to take your power if you have power? A military coup. And so what's going to happen is that Hitler, and who is paranoid, because there's no real evidence that this is going to happen or this was a goal of them, is going to try to please these conservatives. He's going to say, so let's not worry about the SA taking over the army. Let's let the army kind of take over the SA. And so to please these conservatives, Hitler's elite personal guard, so the SS, so not the SA, but the SS, who were like the really little group really close to Hitler, is going to arrest and shoot without a trial and without really any evidence, about 100 or about 1,000 SA leaders. So the guys that had been really loyal and did whatever Hitler had asked and had terrorized and allowed him to get to power, and other political enemies. And Hitler's going to give this a condition, though. If he allows this to happen, then the SS, it's going to be the army, has to take an oath to Hitler personally, which is huge. An oath no matter what. And now he's the commander of all, the commander of the government, the commander of the army, the commander of the SS, and so even more power. And it's because of this the SS is going to grow dramatically in influence as Hitler's private army and secret police, and it's going to be led by a gentleman by the name of Heinrich Himmler. And so at this point, the SS is going to join with the political police, the Gestapo, to expand its network of special courts and concentration camps or political prisons. So, oops, forgot to change my slide for the last little part on the bottom of that page. So here's Heinrich Himmler, and so of course then this SS group is going to be eventually the ones we talk about running those concentration camps, and this is how they came to power. So still with Hitler and consolidating his power. So if you are consolidating your power, you need to make sure the young are on your side always. And so Hitler believes that the future of Germany and Nazism lies in the children. His view of children is that the weak must be chiseled away, that he needs children who can suffer and survive pain. He's going to focus on the age group of 10 to 18. We're going to see separate roles for boys and girls in this Hitler Youth movement, just like we saw in fascism in Italy, where there's different tasks for boys and girls. So like boys will go to military athletic training, like to become good soldiers. So like how to crawl under barbed wire and how to shoot a gun and how to march and trench building and all of this stuff. And girls, see if you could live up to this, needed to run 60 meters in 14 seconds, throw a ball 12 meters, be able to go on a 2-hour march, 100-meter swim, because healthy girls make healthy babies. And eventually, membership in Hitler Youth will effectively become mandatory, so you had to be part. So you hear people say, oh, you were part of like Hitler's Youth, that's horrible. Well, they had to be. It was required. And this is an example of how totalitarian regimes demanded participation by the masses, in contrast to 7th century absolutism, where regimes merely sought obedience. So this is like total given, totalitarianism. Children were actually encouraged, and this may, especially this time of year, seem awesome to you guys, turn in their teachers or even their parents if they seem disloyal to the Reich or the Nazis. And so like, you are not happy with the assignment that was given by Mrs. Troutman? No, she said the Jews are awesome, and then, I disappear to some prison camp. So, yeah, total control. Okay, so then they're going to start the persecution of the Jews. So after January of 1933, when Hitler comes to power, the Jews are going to become the Untermen. So remember, we had the Superman. This means subhuman. So at this time, Hitler, who preluded this in his book, is going to start to make the Jews subhuman or dehumanize them, lesser, the bottom. So then by 1934, with the help of our SS or German thugs, we're going to see that Germans are prevented from shopping in Jewish shops. We don't want German money spent with the Jews because remember, they're to blame for all. And all Jewish shops are going to be marked with Jewish stars or the Star of David or the word Juden in yellow paint. The SS would stand outside and make sure that no one comes in. And so remember we talked about the Eastern question. This is Hitler's the Jewish question. So, I mean, this isn't violent at first. First part of it, he just thinks I'll just harass them economically and maybe they'll just leave. And so this would have been the answer to Hitler's, Jewish question if they would have just left. But then by the end of 1934, most Jewish lawyers, doctors, professors, civil servants, and musicians had lost their jobs and the right to practice their profession. So again, he just hopes that they will leave. And then in 1934, he's going to pass, or 1935, I'm sorry, he's going to pass the Nuremberg laws, which will deprive Jews of all rights of citizenship. So how do you determine who's Jewish? He determines it by anyone who had one Jewish grandparent is Jewish. And so like if you had 3 grandparents that were Aryan and one that was Jewish, you're considered Jewish. However, there is going to be a way you can pay a fine to leave. So people who just lost their job but still have money can get out. And this is the beginning of the real persecution, but there's going to be a slight break to this persecution in 1936 because of the Olympics. So in 1936, the Olympics are held in Berlin, and so the whole world is in Germany, and there are the hints at this Aryan thing going on at the time. And by the way, a black man from the United States, Jesse Owens, beats all of his runners, but on a side note there. Anyway, so he's going to lighten up this persecution for a little bit just to try to look good. But then what did the Nuremberg laws say? Marriage or sex between Jews and other Germans will become prohibited. And Jews cannot hire German women under the age of 45 as domestic workers. Jews will be forbidden from displaying the Reich or the national flag. And then all of these other things. Jews would not be able to use hospitals, could not be educated past the age of 14, prohibited from using parks, libraries, and beaches. Their names would have to be struck from war memorials. And then by 1939, 50% of Germany's 500,000 Jews had immigrated. And so who were the main people to leave? They were the ones with money, like I said, that could pay to get out, the really educated ones. What would you say, like, quote, cream of the crop of the Jewish population, or like Einstein, for et cetera, is going to come to America. And I guess it's a good thing because he's going to write a letter to the president that says, we can develop this thing called the atomic bomb. Not that I'm calling the atomic bomb a good thing, but I mean, I guess, I don't know which way you want to look at it. But anyway, so the cream of the crop gone. The government's going to use these immigration fees and confiscation of Jewish property to help the government to finance its recovery. So serving a dual purpose, the Jewish question and the money problem in Germany. And then Hitler is going to take it up a notch. And so how Hitler takes it up a notch is Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass is what that translates to mean. In 1938, Hitler's going to order an attack on Jewish communities, and he is going to use the pretense, so not the reason for doing it, we know his reason, but a pretense is that a Jew did a really bad thing to a German. So in November of 1938, a Nazi diplomat will be shot down by a 17-year-old Jew, and this is actually really like a personal or family thing, but he's going to use it as a pretense, it's not the reason, to organize this wave of violence, or 7-day wave of violence. And so Himmler and the SS are going to lead this very well-organized wave of violence, destroying homes, burning down synagogues, robbing Jewish businesses. All happens on November 10th. 10,000 shops are destroyed. And so, like, if you're a German fireman and you're loyal to Hitler, what are you going to do? Even though it's your job, you're going to let them burn. Maybe just make sure that it doesn't spread to German homes. And so then the real kicker of this whole thing is that Himmler, and the SS are going to blame the Jews for this damage that they had just done to them, arrest them, and make them pay for the damage. So they're going to have to pay 1 billion marks, and even have to be in the streets cleaning up. And so after Kristallnacht is when things are really going to get bad, and when it's going to be very hard for Jews to get out after this point, and going to lead us into our next point, the Holocaust. So after Kristallnacht, things get really bad, and it's very hard for Jews to any longer get out of Germany. And so then Hitler's going to up it even more. And really, this is because he had the Jewish question. The answer is we'll harass them economically, and we'll harass them with the Night of Broken Glass, and they'll leave. But not enough left. And the main reason for this is because other countries wouldn't take them. I mean, we've seen go to France. No, we don't want your Jews. Anti-Semitism. I mean, even boats coming to the United States turned away. Even us. I mean, was it all anti-Semitism here? And maybe not everywhere else either. But there's the Great Depression going on, and then what's going to happen? You let this boat of Jews in, and then you politicians are going to say, look, things got worse, and it's the Jews, and the boats try to go to Cuba, and so they're going all around the world, but then eventually they're going to land back in Germany, and this is where we're going to see Hitler's final solution, because his first solution had just been to try to harass them to get them to leave. And so Hitler's tried all of these other things, and his last or final answer is going to be the Holocaust, where he starts to systematically start wiping out the Jewish population, first in Germany, of course, the Jews in Germany, and then as they move more eastward, the Jews there. So eventually 6 million European Jews will be killed during World War II in what is known as the final solution. We're also going to see that another 6 million other victims of Nazi persecution are going to include Slavs, Gypsies, Jehovah's Witnesses, communists, homosexuals, mentally handicapped, and political opponents, totaling 6 million by 1945, so 12 million altogether. So there's this documentary this teacher did to try to show her students what 6 million was, and they were collecting paper clips to try to get 6 million, sending out and having people send paper clips, and it filled up rooms and rooms to just show what 6 million is. I mean, I don't think we can even comprehend that. I mean, going from just trying to harass economically to 6 million Jews gone and 6 million other undesirables within Germany and throughout the war. So I'm just going to show you some images really quickly. You probably saw this when you read Night as a sophomore by Elie Wiesel, who was a Holocaust survivor in the barracks of the concentration camps. I know you guys have had all of this in world history, but just, the emancipation and the horrors. Also, I think I have the next one is the mass burials. Yeah, and so here is, just an image of, the mass pits of the bodies from the concentration camps or labor camps, and, all the varying, but huge death toll. And so some videos with other visuals, but you guys have had the Holocaust. I mean, you could just spend forever on it, the crematoriums, the showers, the mass, but just really understanding 12 million people gone as a result of this extermination. And so then next we're going to be moving into the Third Reich and the German economic recovery, 1933 to 1945. And so then what we really need to talk about is, how does Hitler get so popular? I mean, he is kind of insane, and really it's going to be because people think he's great because he turns the German economy around. They're like, oh, we're happy except for that Jewish thing. He was a great guy. I mean, there's wheelbarrows full of money and all of this crazy chaos, and he's going to turn that around, and it's really going to be the major reason for Hitler's soaring popularity, and maybe why people kind of turn that except for that one Jewish thing. And so Hitler is going to deliver on his economic promise of work and bread that he given, where there are going to be jobs and there's going to be food. He's going to actually improve Germany's economy very similarly to how the U.S. tries to solve the Depression, by stimulating the economy, by building things like the New Deal and FDR. He's going to start large public work programs to get Germany out of the Depression, including superhighways or the Autobahn, offices, gigantic sports stadiums, and public housing. So remember, the government's going to pump money, like that water pump we talked about, pump money in to satiate it, and then that money should come back once people have jobs, they have money, and they'll start spending. And so then Hitler in 1936 is going to take this recovery a step further than even the United States by starting to rearm in 1936, because they hadn't been allowed to under the Treaty of Versailles. But Hitler's going to disregard this, and we'll talk more about this later, about how he ignores kind of the tenements of the treaty. But this is really like the more the government invested in this armament is going to equal more jobs, and it's the armament that really gets them out of the depression. Like you could almost say it wasn't the New Deal that got the United States out of the depression; it was World War II. But definitely, the rearmament is going to be the biggest push for economic recovery. So the results of the Nazi economic policies: unemployment is going to drop from 6 million in January of 1933 to about 1 million in late 1936. So he delivered. The people are like, wow, look at Hitler, like he's great. By 1938, the shortage of actual shortage of workers will exist. After we've had 43% unemployed, we're going to have a shortage of workers, and so they're going to have to kind of turn to the women now and say, women take some jobs, even though earlier they have been very anti-feminist. And so women are going to have to step up to the plate to work. By 1938, the standard of living for the average employed worker increased moderately, and there's even going to be programs for the poor, and profits of business are going to rise sharply. Okay, so our final discussion here: Nazi society. Just like we discussed in the Soviet Union, was there really a social revolution? Was there really a huge change? Probably not so much. Really well-educated classes held on to most of the advantage they possessed prior to the rise of Hitler. We're going to see only a modest social leveling occur, so not any big, class changes. Like in fascist Italy, so you need to know the women in Italy and Germany are going to be similar here. Women were viewed as housewives and mothers. Actually, their rights are going to be rolled back a bit just like in Italy. Hitler is going to implore, just like Mussolini had in Italy, that German women need to make babies for the Reich or make babies for Germany, get married and have babies. And so the government would actually give you a loan of 1,000 marks, which was about 9 months of wages just for getting married. And so about 800,000 newlyweds will, take advantage of this. So it's a loan. You're going to have to pay it back. But here's the kicker. If you have one baby, you get 25% of that loan knocked off. If you have 2, you get 50% of it knocked off. And if you have 4, you don't have to pay the loan back. And even to have there's awards, just like Mussolini had that celebration. August 12th was Hitler's mother's birthday, and so there was this Motherhood of Cross award every year for awesome moms, I guess is what you could say the term was. So there was gold, silver, and bronze. So if you had 8 or more children, you got a gold. If you had 6 or more, silver, and 4 would be bronze. And so these awards for being, awesome moms having a lot of children for the Reich. Illegitimate births are not frowned upon. In fact, there's like these Lebensborns where pure German women or beautiful women would be like encouraged to go to these places and like get together with an SS guy, like a pure Aryan guy, and to make these beautiful babies. It's like encouraged, like it wasn't frowned upon, like not married, just pump out these great Aryan children. We're gonna see that beautiful women became like women's role just becomes to be beautiful, to have babies, to stay at home, no makeup for women because you're supposed to be beautiful as you are, only wearing flat shoes, better to be a little thick than thin because that makes for a better birthing mother. We're going to see that birth control information and abortions were forbidden for German women, although definitely allowed for unwanted groups such as Jews, Gypsies, and Slavs. Like, please, yeah, you guys get an abortion, but not our Aryan women. Women are still going to be denied most meaningful occupations outside of the home. And so, like, if you did have an occupation outside of the home, you'd be fired for your men, expected to be a housewife. And the only exception we're going to see that is in wartime, there were large numbers of women who will have to be mobilized for work in offices and factories as we get into World War II. So that will be the only exception to this. So women in Italy and Germany definitely rolled back, while in the Soviet Union we saw move forward. And that's the end of 10.1 part 3 and the second half of it. And we'll pick up with 10.2 part 1 for this weekend.